the farm of the future is one that you're able to meet the changing demands of cows, meet the changing demands of labor availability, like ensure that you've got market access for your milk. And they have changed over time in the past. I'm absolutely certain they're going to change in the future. But that's discussions like this are, what do we need to do to prepare? What decisions are important for us to decide now, and not and make it possible to achieve something bigger in the future.
Hello, welcome back to the Dairy Podcast Show. My name is Barry Bradford from Michigan State University, and today I'm very pleased to welcome to the show Steve Harnish from Central Manor Dairy in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
I'll just share right away, I had the great pleasure of visiting your farm a couple years ago for a project, and actually, embarrassingly, had somebody that's been involved in the dairy industry for 20 years or something. I'd heard about Lancaster County forever, but I had never visited until I saw your farm, and I could see why people talk about it so much. So tell me a little bit about your family history, if you would. How did you guys end up in that area, and how did you end up sort of running the farm now?
We are the third generation on this real estate here. My generation, the family has been in Lancaster County, some of the earliest Europeans that showed up, about 300 years now. I don't know specifically how many generations dairy goes back there, but longer than recorded history. And I went away to school for a bachelor's degree from Penn State. Actually considered a minor in international agriculture. I didn't know if there was going to be a spot for me for the rest of my career as a manager on a farm. Turns out there was a good fit for where the previous generation was, and been managing the dairy since 2000 and ownership since 2007.
And maybe we should start with just a sort of a little bit of a sketch of what the farm looks like scale-wise, and what do you guys on? 200
milking 200 cows 3 times a day, mostly Holstein. I've got a kind of a crossbreeding project that makes up 18% of the cows in the milking herd. I would say managed fairly intensively, both the crop, double crops and cover crops, and just paying close attention to each cow. We got invested in some technology over the years, and I see that as the trend that's going to be happening going forward. I would say most of Lancaster County is very constrained for land base, and so if you want to add more acreage and grow in scale, $30,000 an acre is not going to get you anything. You need to go north of that. So that may be a unique aspect for where we are versus some other parts of the country where you see rapid expansion in dairies.
Maximize profitability and herd health with early detection in animal health, reproduction, and feeding. The most advanced Bolus technology and professional support from agricultural experts make this possible with SmaxTech, the health management system that future-proofs your dairy operation.
I think that sets a really interesting frame around what we planned the conversation to be, which is dairies of the future, right? And innovation in dairy. And often I think when people think of that, they think of gleaming brand new and frankly, typically very large scale facilities with, lots of fancy tech and labor saving technologies and stuff. So it's interesting to think about in an area where you're very constrained in terms of scale just by land availability, right? And with some value in terms of residual infrastructure, but it's not probably going to make sense at any point to say, let's just rip it all down and put all new. To talk with you about how you think about, innovating and driving towards a newer next generation dairy in your situation.
Well, I'll start with a small anecdote that makes me think of this topic. The barn I'm sitting in is the oldest one that houses milking cows for us, built in 1974. And at the time when they built it, a number of similar 4-row freestall barns being built in the area. The previous generation wanted to bed freestalls with silage truck, drive the truck to the sawmill, get a load, run it out the cross conveyor. But to do that, you need the alleys to be slightly wider than what's normal, and you need the sidewalls to be high enough to get the rafters above the forage body. And that's the way they built it. fast forward from 74 to 84 to 94 to 04, every decade we figure out, hey, the potential of these cows is so much better when we ventilate our barns. And that original design was not for ventilation. Like, I know this because they nailed tin to the sides and just left a little 2-foot louver at the top that, in case cows need air, we can open those up. Obviously, with, as knowledge increases and the potential, genetic potential of cows increases, we need facilities to support that. And because they accidentally made this decision back in the 70s, we're able to make kind of a modern looking barn right now. The cows' beds that they lay on, the free stalls, were originally 1974 dimensions. Twice they've been extended with a new curb and updated the designs. I had a few years back, it's almost 10 years now, the folks from Novus will offer anyone who uses their feed ingredients to come out and do an analysis of lying time and do Hock scoring and everything. And I'll admit that I have a tendency, whenever I see benchmarks and my number against them, to, like, if I surpass it, like, I'm proud of myself, yay, great job us. But if the number looks like I'm not achieving something, well, I'll just dismiss it. I'll justify it. The sample size is off, or they don't understand, my farm and how it operates. But they put the numbers right in front of my face, like, look at your Hock scores and these, 80 other farms from various regions of the country. Look at your lying time, and the raw numbers don't lie. So the last remodel we did of the barn made the stalls substantially larger. Ventilation has moved from what it was in the 70s to more fans, more openings, more curtains, more fans. And so the farm of the future is one that you're able to meet the changing demands of cows, meet the changing demands of labor availability, like ensure that you've got market access for your milk. And they've changed over time in the past. I'm absolutely certain they're going to change in the future. But that's discussions like this are, what do we need to do to prepare? What decisions are important for us to decide now, and not and make it possible to achieve something bigger in the future.
One thing that really stands out to me, as you tell that story, is it drives home what makes, I think, producers, farmers in general, but especially dairy producers, so impressive, is that you can have blanket recommendations, but depending on the environment, the type of land you're on, the weather patterns in your area, the existing infrastructure that you have to work through, the permitting is, every situation is different, right? So how do we think about helping people in such different situations, come up with a concept of how to build a dairy that's going to be sustainable for, the coming generations?
I'll admit, when we're speaking to like a domestic audience all across the U.S. Or maybe someone international, we have a tendency to give really broad answers and not be specific at all. And there's a reason for that. Like, every region has its own constraints. Just always have, always will. If you're in the Central Valley of California and surface water wasn't adequate to irrigate, you had groundwater. And the trend they've seen, and it's in place right now, is regulating the pumping of groundwater. So you actually every decision is centered around this huge constraint in front of you. The New York passed legislation for minimum wage and overtime hours, and whatever your business model had in the past for labor inputs, all the math changes going forward with that. And who knows what the immigration system will look like going forward, even in the near term, with what labor availability and price will be. And so in every part of the country, there's some reaction to what your individual constraint is. Here, I talked about real estate price. Like, we decided our farm is going to be as labor efficient as we can get it. Manage things as intensively as we can. But for example, we have all vertical storage for feed ingredients. Time to mix feed, we push buttons, feed comes out. Manure storage is mostly slatted floors with a pit underneath. Not collecting any rainwater, no maintenance on gutter cleaners or flush systems or anything like that. But it's centered around, there's few people working on it. We keep the head count low, and your day is filled with do this task, move to the next one, move to the next one, get out of there, versus having a specialized employee to do each thing. So labor efficiency for us, and then managing each cow intensively um, is the other part of it, and that's how we proceed in the environment that we're here in.
That makes sense. So you're talking about dealing with constraints you have on inputs and trying to contain costs and stuff. What about on the revenue side? Are there things you think about, and even maybe further out from the next 3 or 4 years, that could change your revenue model?
We talk about the conditions we have today, and we can't live under the assumption that we're going to have the same market access in the future that we have today. I don't want to go back too far, but like when you look at the American dairy industry, it's largely made up of immigrants from somewhere else that had some constraint there. Their lives are upended and they moved. My folks were 300 years ago. There have been migrations from all over the world to here. We can't get complacent and think that it's always going to be this way. Dairies move around the country from place to place. We migrate to where there's opportunity. That's not my personal preference. I kind of like it here.
Yep.
But so what are those future constraints going to be that we're not thinking about today? When you look at cooperatives, in the past, they had an obligation to take all their members' milk, find a home for it. And the opportunity for growth was you grow, the milk finds a home. The trend recently has been to match up their milk supply, so constrain the growth of their membership with the profitable outlets, whether it's a contract, whether it's a facility that they own on their own, and match supply and demand. And then the onus is on the farmers, on the members, to be the balancers of the entire system. And if you're in one of those regions or in one of those cooperatives, that constrains your growth. You cannot do it with scale, or you have to purchase base or buy out another farmer or something. So you can just find yourself in a geography or a member of an organization that puts a limit on it. I think about the move recently for us to quantify the carbon intensity of our milk production. A good measure is carbon intensity per pound of milk, or per gallon, whatever your preference is. And I mentioned this topic, and it may not be everyone's cup of tea to think about or talk about. The consumer that walks into the store might not be the one that is asking for the low carbon milk, but the actual consumer packaged goods companies and the retailers that sell them, it's definitely top of mind for them, and it's not going away. I will say some of those organizations have gotten a little bit out over their skis a little bit in making commitments for the future, but the trend itself isn't going away. I think it's still an immature market of trying to move value back to the farmer through insets and offsets, but we're making progress. It's moving in that direction. It's an immature market, but it will be there in the future. Farmers are also good at math, and we still use common sense. So we're going to point out if something's silly, if something isn't sustainable long term. But in spite of all of that, I think you should take the opportunity to find out what the carbon intensity of your current practices are, and then if there's like an opportunity whenever you're looking at a future project, if your management goals align with a significant carbon reduction process, if there's some practice you can implement and lower that score, I think you want to be in the bottom half of carbon intensity if you want a long-term market access for your dairy. There are funding streams that are coming online right now to help nudge you in that direction. There are some things that seem a little bit out of whack with how much public money is being supplied for what outcome. But the trend is set right now, and it's going to continue in that direction.
I'm curious if you think this is a good analogy, but I think a little bit about, as an academic, I saw people speculating about the potential impact with sex semen of, doing a lot more beef on dairy stuff probably 25 years ago. And it just felt like, oh, this is never actually going to take off. And then I think partly because of things that happened with drought in the beef market, it just seemed like in 3 years it went from 10% of people doing it to 90. And I kind of wonder if some of the market access with carbon footprinting is going to be a similar deal.
There are market fundamentals behind this surge in beef on dairy.
Yeah.
Like there was real value that could be
Right.
Captured if it's just a slight change in our practices, and we're always producing bull calves, right? We always have been. Just the ratio goes from the black and white ones to the black ones that are desired by the market. I would say, and so there are solid economic fundamentals for why that shift happened. I think it's harder for us to wrap our heads around the carbon market because we start out with conservation, thinking, look, I like topsoil, I like keeping it, so I'm really in favor of waterways, terraces, like all the practices and contour strips. So okay, keep topsoil on the ground. That's easy to understand. We grasp the downstream effects of um, nutrient runoff. So like, yeah, it's important to, where necessary, implement riparian buffers, cover crops where you need to, and like the downstream effects are real. I get it. It's another leap of the imagination or another leap of mindset to say all of human civilization shares one atmosphere and everyone contributes these elements to it. Why should I make a practice change in my dairy when it's shared with everyone all over the world? It's another hurdle that we have to leap to be all on the same page. I think that page that we're all leaping to is undetermined, but we know the market forces at work. There are market forces in the background. They're just not as obvious as this huge spike in beef price. Uh, so they're there.
I like how you think about these things. So let's maybe shift to thinking about, so the concept is the dairy of the future, and part of that is making very concrete decisions about, we've talked about some practices, right? But there's also concrete decisions on investments. Shifting to producing more beef cross calves is not a huge investment, it's a change in practice, right? But some things, you talked about putting more fans in or a new tech, those are things where you got to put pencil to paper and say, is this going to pay off? How do you approach some of those questions, or do you have big picture concepts on how we should think about those?
I kind of divide it into two categories. There are these like stair step opportunities where there's some efficiency to be gained when you make the step up to this size or this product. Think of like a cross ventilated barn or a rotary parlor.
Yep.
It makes no sense to put 200 cows through a 60 stall rotary. If you can grow to that scale, all that labor and efficiency and energy that can be saved from a cross vent barn or from a rotary parlor is there, but you have to get to that point to do it. On a smaller scale, my understanding is with Lely milking robots, if you buy 3 units, that's 90% of the cost of buying a fourth one. So like a 240 cow dairy is kind of a good size. You have to get up the stairs to that point, and then it kind of makes sense. A local one, here's one that we took advantage of. We have upright silos for storing all of our feed. We do some custom work as well on other farms. We get around other size facilities, and in the past, we always had like a 24-foot diameter stave silo was kind of the standard, whatever height you want to make it. The opportunity came out, the company that's installing 30-foot poured concrete silos. So significantly more volume in the same footprint, scale up the unloaders and everything. But if you make one 100 feet tall, you can fit a lot of feed in there. The cost per ton goes down versus the old one, and roughly the same footprint. You make it 120 feet tall, you're adding a little bit of foundation, a little bit of rebar to the bottom, but it's more. Now the newest one I'm aware of is 150 foot tall silo in that footprint. The cost per ton just keeps going down versus a cluster of the old 24 by 80s with multiple unloaders in them. So I think everyone's aware of it. I suspect maybe some of our audience has a plan, a roadmap going forward with what they want to do. They got a profit team, they got advisors, and maybe this isn't the podcast for them. They can listen to it on 2X if they want. But there are a number of us that are in this position where it's a little bit uneasy or uncertain what's next, and I think it's important to look around at those stair step opportunities. And is that this new thing came out? Other folks are starting with it. Should I get to that point as we look at future investments? The second one would be just scalable opportunities, like things that work in a 40 stall, 40 cow barn, or 40,000. And the one that comes to mind that seems fairly obvious, we've been on this journey of individual animal monitoring on our farm. The old milking parlor built in '74 had glass weigh jars. You milk the cow, you look over, she gave 25 pounds, she gave 30 pounds. There's this visual representation of how much the milk the cow is giving. And it's helpful if you have 100 cows and can memorize how much you expect from all 100. But when it came time to replace that one, the next parlor had meters in it. It's just August of 2009. And milking 3X in the new parlor, and about 2 weeks later, maybe 3 weeks later, we had a round of some kind of dysentery come through. I suspect that's what it was. Cows spiked a fever, got dehydrated, and I had data every shift. You'd see the drop in milk production because it was live and it was permanent and it was in the computer, and like take management actions on that. Soon after I made the shift, like a lot of folks, to heat detection systems for our heifers. You're no longer spending time down there watching and interpreting it. You've got on-camera monitoring. And then the latest progression is the smack stack rumen boluses. Put them in the cows, and we moved from looking in general at reducing metabolic disorders, like what can we do with our dry cow ration, what can we do with our housing, and like lower the incidence, but they never go away. Like I've not solved making every cow have a perfect experience through transition. We lower the incidence, but here's a way in which you can get the early warning. The analogy I use is if you're growing a field of alfalfa, you don't want to wait until the leaf hoppers have eaten all the leaves off, then go treat it. You like want to know when they first arrive and take appropriate action so that you preserve the actual crop that's there. So it's kind of all of these systems are a no cow left behind. To take a page from a previous presidential administration talking about education, that one that sticks out, find it early, intervene before she gets derailed for the rest of her career.
Natural Biologics is using cutting-edge science to deliver cost-effective solutions for the animal health and productivity challenges you face. For conventional or organic production systems, Natural Biologics can help support rumen health and immune function, mitigate pathogens, and increase production efficiency. Visit naturalbiologics.com to learn more.
I'm thinking about a farm like yours where you maybe have 4 or 5 calves a week. Obviously, you can't have a full-time person watching maternity, especially when your profitability model is around keeping head count down. So has that had an impact on how you can go about your day?
That's not the most valuable aspect of monitoring cows, but it's there and it's a feature. You might as well use it. We can't have 100 different pens for all the different animals on the farm. You got to do some merging. So we have a calving pen that's the 10 days before calving, they get segregated there.
Okay.
And then a very small individual calving pen. If you get that calving alert and can segregate the cow at the alert time instead of when she's halfway through labor, I happen to have a camera on that individual one. So if it's midnight, we're done with the night shift, and you segregate a cow and you want to know, you can lay in bed an hour later and confirm there's a calf born. But yeah, that's one small aspect, one feature of it that works.
Yeah, it's good. The other thing that came to my mind, again, just back to this idea of you have to look at these things in your own situation of like in Michigan or further west, I don't know of anybody talking about upright silos anymore, right? But
nope.
$35,000 an acre land, a big drive over pile doesn't look that appealing probably. And so, yeah, it's interesting.
And it's one of those things that's affected by your geography. Another example I can think of is slatted floor barns. We're in the zone where you go much further north, and if it freezes up over the winter, you get a cold snap for 4 days. Cows don't want to walk on that. It's just not practical. But it's a really popular option in this area, and a lot of uptake by folks when they were considering what to do in the last 20, 30 years. It coincides, and I'll add this, it coincides with the grant funding opportunities that are sometimes specific to each region. We're in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and so when you target money for manure storage, that drove the adoption. We don't care if you build an above ground, a lagoon, whatever you're building, you need 6 months of storage, and here we'll pay to to make sure you achieve that. And if you can build the foundation of your barn um, as manure storage and pay for the covers, whatever the formula allows you, that nudge in that direction drove adoption of something that's beneficial for the watershed.
Makes a lot of sense. One last question I have in terms of how you think about the future of your business. I mean, if I look at like comparative strengths and weaknesses in your scenario, your region of the country, um, I think what you just said kind of alludes to one of the challenges of you're surrounded by a lot of neighbors, right?
Yeah.
So there's a
Yep.
lot of eyes, a lot of people who can smell, and you want to keep them happy.
Yeah.
The flip side of that maybe is you potentially have a decent market if you want to do any sort of like direct marketing or agritourism or anything. I'm sure you guys have thought about things like that.
It's a personal choice, and there are a lot of folks that have looked ahead um, and said, "Is that an avenue that I want to pursue? Maybe I can stay at the scale that I'm at." Got a former employee that did that. He's direct to consumers as well as some small specialty stores manufacturing his own product. That's an option. We got people around. It's a blessing and a curse.
Yep.
It speaks to, I think, a larger question of when you're setting up your farm of the future, what is it that you want to be doing?
Yep.
Like you personally, what do you want to pursue? And do a time budget of like, am I managing people? Am I messing around with cows? Do I have something off farm that I need to be flexible to move back and forth? Each of my partners here in the farm has something they want to pursue. And so we actually wrapped and our children possibly in the future, we wrapped our setup around what is going to make me content with my situation for the rest of my career here.
That's a really excellent point. I think some of those direct marketing things, people don't anticipate properly the amount of customer service time and just, and if you don't want to spend your time doing that,
people are motivated by different things. Like when I looked at career options and after graduating and reflecting on my choice here, there's a satisfaction of seeing something tangible get loaded onto a truck and drive out the driveway every morning, like producing something for people. There are folks that actually want that interaction with the customer, want to be responsive to customer needs. Like if you're proud that a high-end restaurant chooses your product on their menu and like that's what drives them. There are other ones of us that like, being in a barn, spending a little bit of time in the office, being out in a tractor, that's the end pursuit. And hopefully you have your business set up in a way that allows that.
Yeah, well said. I love my job. I wouldn't trade it, but there are weeks where it's like, I'm working on all things that take 5 years to accomplish. So it's really nice sometimes to go home and mow the lawn on Saturday because I can see a fruit of my labor immediately.
It's time for our famous three. Adiseo, a global leader in nutritional solutions and the provider of Smart Amine M, the best in-class rumen-protected methionine product for dairy producers who want to optimize milk production, capture more value from their components, and maintain the lifetime performance of their herds. For more product information and to calculate your return on investment when you balance your feed with amino acids, go to milkpay.com.
Okay, well, we've got a few questions we ask everybody before we wrap up an episode. So, first of all, what's your favorite dairy-related book or resource that you turn to?
I'll call it a resource. There are peer groups that establish for dairy farmers, formal ones and informal ones. My favorite resource are the 8 closest farms around me. Oftentimes we'll share a nutritionist, share an agronomist, have a similar style milking parlor set up. I'm on the smaller scale relative to some. And so for me to try out a new, time to eye protocol or something, I can make a tweak and then wait 2 years till I actually know anything about it. Somebody that's pushing 1,000 or 2,000 cows through the same protocol is going to get results sooner. So I think that's a trustworthy source of information. I think it's very specific to our region, and it's good to have a peer group and you call up if something breaks or somebody can call on you if you need help for something. So that's my best resource.
Last one, in your opinion, what sets successful dairy professionals apart from those who are not so successful?
This is going to disappoint any recent graduates or anyone entering the industry. My most trusted advisors, and I think some of the most successful, have a long tenure at what they're doing. Like, find whatever skills they have that matches up with the situation or problem to be solved, and just do it and be the authority, be the local authority, be the national authority, whatever it is, for a long time. When I love talking to folks that have a broad experience in various different parts, like they're great conversation, learn a lot from folks like that. But whenever you come in here with 1 or 2 years of experience, I like talking to you, but you're not yet trusted to the point of I'll go out on a limb, or I'll write a check, or I'll you'll be a supplier for the rest of my career. And there are folks like that. Like, we have long-standing relationships. So that's the quality, is the ability to like become eventually a trusted source of knowledge and decision making.
Yep, there's no shortcut to experience, right? Pretty darn valuable. Yeah. Well said. Well, again, this has been Steve Harnish from Central Manor Dairy, Pennsylvania. Steve, thank you for taking the time to talk with us. This was a great conversation.
Absolutely enjoyed it. It's my pleasure.
All right, this has been another episode of the Dairy Podcast Show, brought to you by Wisenetics. And again, I'm Barry Bradford from Michigan State. If you haven't liked the show or followed it so far, make sure you do that so you don't miss the next episode. And we'll see you then.